You're good to go.
Yeah, otherwise, yeah, shall I start now?
Please do.
Let me,
I guess I should say, everyone, Paul Goldberg.
Okay, and I know a few people in the audience. I don't know everybody. That's always a good mix. You can see my presenter view. Is that correct?
Yes.
Presentation view, not the presenter view.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Paul Goldberg. I'm based in Japan. I'm the owner of X Reading. This is an academic presentation, but there will be some mentioning of commercial product if hopefully you're not offended by such things. And if you are, I understand if you prefer not to stay. So the topic again is online speed reading, the fastest way to improve reading fluency. Okay. First point I like to say is why, and I should say I use reading fluency, speed reading, time reading kind of interchangeably. So the first question is, why is reading fluency so important? Well, this is the very practical reason is students need to read. Students have limited time. Therefore, the faster students can read, the more they can accomplish with their limited amount of time. I think it's pretty evident there. This could be for academic assignments. It could be for standardized tests. It could be just for pleasure reading. You know, if they can read more in the amount of time, they're going to enjoy more. So just being able to read fluently is important, whatever a student is doing, or whatever a person is doing, really. And then there's the affect. I think this is best explained by Christine Nuttall's seminal work, which I think is actually called The Reading Effect, where she found with difficult books, students read slowly. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Students will read slowly. If students are reading slowly, they're not going to enjoy reading very much. If they don't enjoy reading, they're going to probably read less. The less they read, well, it's not going to improve their understanding. And she called this a vicious cycle. And her main point was if students are having very difficult content, they slow, and like I said, they're not going to enjoy it, and it's not going to get any better, and it keeps staying in that situation. She was an advocate of easy books. She felt if students can understand well, then they'll read quickly. If students can read quickly, they're going to naturally enjoy. If they enjoy reading, guess what? They will read more, and the more they read, it will improve their understanding, meaning they can read even faster. And she called this a virtuous cycle. Okay, so that is, I think, two reasons why being able to read fluency is very important. There's different routes to improving reading fluency. One maybe we're all familiar with is extensive reading. If in case you don't know what extensive reading is, it's a practice of reading large quantities of text that is easy to understand. It's in contrast to intensive reading, which is usually short and difficult. I've taught both in Japan and Korea, so I know intensive reading is the more of the norm. Students are reading things that are difficult, they need their dictionary, and it's not very pleasant, but it is an important thing to practice. With extensive reading, it's much easier, and they can read quickly. It's based on Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis, which basically says if students are exposed to large quantities of language that they understand, they will begin to acquire the language. Okay. The basic principles come mainly from Richard Day and Julian Bamfort's seminal work, which is now 22 years old, hard to believe, extensive reading in a second language classroom. Students generally are reading for meaning. Text has few unknown words. The emphasis is on fluency over accuracy, which again is not typical. When I say reading for meaning, they're reading to understand the story, not just understand the vocabulary or the grammar like they're typically doing in a language classroom. The text is relatively long, and therefore graded readers are typically used for extensive reading. And students often choose their own stories. Okay, that's the basic principles of extensive reading. The main benefits, number one, students see a purpose to reading, which is hopefully to engage with a story. They can enjoy it. Again, I put enjoy in quotations because I've had teachers come to me and say, oh, you know, extensive reading doesn't work for me. My students don't love reading. I said, well, that's not quite what we're aiming for. Enjoy just means relative to your typical language learning activities. Vocabulary is recycled. When I say recycled, I'm not talking about putting your trash in the correct bin. I mean using the same words. Students see the words they're familiar with, but don't really know deeply or know how to use them. They see those words used repeatedly in different contexts, and that's how they really get a much deeper understanding of those words and how they're used. Their understanding of known words is expanded, and reading speed and fluency improve. And there's research that demonstrates that, and I will be showing some of that research a little bit later. There's problems, though, implementing extensive reading program. Big one is just lack of books. If you don't have enough books, you can't do it. And if you have 100 students, it doesn't mean you need 100 books, because students are different levels, different interests. You need maybe 1,000 books for 100 students. And if you have 1,000 students, you need 10,000 books. Not easy. Class sets. Extensive reading is typically about students choosing their own book, but there are benefits to students choosing books. Students reading the same book because they can do more engaging activities. If you think about it, when you meet your friends and discuss a story or a movie, do you tell your friend about a movie that you saw that they didn't see? Or do you talk about a movie that you've both seen and have some points to discuss? So that's why class readers are actually beneficial. Monitoring if students are actually reading. In pure extensive reading, it might not be necessary, but in an academic context, when we have to give grades to students, it's actually quite important. Tracking, recording what they're reading, especially if they're doing a lot of reading. Getting students to read regularly, not wait until the very end of the semester and do all of the reading that they've been required to do, which is quite typical. Integrating the audio. Most publishers make professionally narrated narrations of their audio, which is great. But believe it or not, in the year 2022, they still put it on a CD. Do students today even know what a CD is, or a CD player? Certainly nobody's carrying one around in their bag, so it's not very useful. And accessibility. When I thought of accessibility, this main problem, I was thinking the weekend, nighttime vacation. I was not really thinking global pandemics, but obviously coronavirus, COVID, has made it very difficult at times for students to get to libraries, and the idea even touching books that many other people have touched has become a little bit less appealing. Because of all these problems, I looked for a solution, couldn't find one. I developed my own called X-Reading VL, which is a virtual library of graded readers students can access anywhere, anytime with no limitations. And the mission is simply making extensive reading easy for teachers, more accessible for students, and profitable for publishers, so they're willing to support a program like this. A quick overview. It's an online library of over 1,500 graded readers from almost every major publisher. And we're constantly adding more books and more publishers. In fact, right after this conference is over, I'm going to be adding about 30 more books. It gives unlimited access, means every student can read every book at the same time. So it's not just 1,500 books, it's 1,500 books per student. So if you have 100 students, it's like having 150,000 graded readers. Works on computers and mobile devices. We have the audio, background information, quizzes, and a standardized level system, which I'll show you in a moment. This is then linked to a learner management system, an LMS, which 2 or 3 years ago, many people did not know what that meant. I think these days, everybody knows what an LMS is. Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, Blackboard, Moodle. The benefit of this, it allows teachers to track all of their students' reading progress, how many books they've read, how many words they've read, things like that, assess their understanding, guide their selections, and assign activities. This is just a quick view of all the levels we have in the system. So no matter what level your students are at, they'll be able to find books that are suitable for them, and a lot of books. Quick demonstration, student logs in, they press the add book button, they're brought to the library. They can see all the books, they can browse or narrow by level, publisher, genre, things like that. They could go to the more information button, which is like going to the real library, getting, seeing the back cover summary, the metadata, is it British English, is it American English, is there audio, how many minutes is the audio, character list, glossary, things like that. Or they could just start reading immediately by pressing the green button. Works on a computer, mobile device. Most important to note is this progress bar up here at the top left. When we press next, that progress bar moves forward, and that's how we track the student's reading. Like I said, it works on mobile devices. Because it's an online system, the student can change the size of the text, they can change the spacing, the margins, they can even change the background color, which could be useful, depending where the student is reading, also if they happen to have reading accessibility issues. This is what the data that's collected when a student stops reading. You can see the book they were reading, how many words they've read, how many minutes they've read, their average reading speed, which is a good way to help students with their reading fluency, look for students who are having problems if they're reading too slowly. Also a good way to catch students who might be cheating. We have quizzes for every book to check if their students have actually read. We have audio. Like I said, publishers make the audio, but they don't make it very accessible. So in X Reading, they can listen anytime they want. And we have the audio at 5 speeds. The original 10% slower, 20% slower, 10% faster, and 20% faster without distortion. So it's not like speeding up the audio on your computer or YouTube. You can also blur the text if you want your students to practice listening instead of reading. They can still see the images. The teacher side of X Reading, there's a list. When you log in, you can see all of your classes, get a very quick summary of what your class has done. Select a specific class, and you can instantly see every student, how many books they've read, how many words they've read, how many minutes they've read, their average reading speed, and their average quiz score. This data can be exported to Excel, and you can filter by any dates that you might want. You can select a specific student and see every book that student has read, when they read it. Pink means they're not getting credit for that book, probably because their reading speed was too high or their quiz score was too low. Okay, so that was a quick demonstration of X Reading, the system I developed, and it's being used about 350 universities and high schools around the world. And it definitely, I would say extensive reading definitely improves students' reading fluency. We have a lot of data through the system that's helped teachers do research to show that this is empirically evident that they can improve their reading fluency. However, there is a big however here. It takes a long time, okay? Even the most enthusiastic advocates of extensive reading like myself fully acknowledge that it doesn't happen overnight. And again, research that strongly supports extensive reading shows the same thing. One of my favorite studies is outside of Kansai University from Begler, Hunt, and Kite. They found that students made statistically significant gains in their reading ability after reading 200,000 words. 200,000 words, obviously a lot. And just to give you an idea, how long will that take? Well, with extensive reading, students can typically read about 150 words a minute. Not their first book or second book, but after they've been doing it for a couple of weeks with books that are very easy for their ability, they can reach that kind of speed. If they can read just 15 minutes per day, how long would it take to reach 200,000 words? Mathematically, 1,333 minutes. If you then divide that by days, it'll take 88 days, which is quite a while, okay? Just to put that into perspective though, intensive reading, when I say intensive reading, I'm talking about what Japanese and Korean students are typically doing, a very difficult reading passage, like the TOEFL, TOEIC, newspaper, Time, Newsweek, whatever students, teacher has students read. What makes it so difficult? Lots of unknown words. What does the student need to do to read it? They need their dictionary. Does the dictionary have one meaning per word? No, there's lots of meanings. Therefore, they have to go back to the context and see which meaning matches the definition. They go back to the dictionary and see which confirm, and maybe write down a short note to remind themselves. In that context, it's about 17 words per minute. Okay, and I've had teachers doubt me on that, and then they've checked it themselves. And yes, it is actually between 15 and 20 minutes, that kind of reading. The student reads for 15 minutes per day, which I think is a reasonable amount. How long would it take to reach 200,000 words? About 11,000 minutes, or well over 2 years. So I think that makes a very strong case why extensive reading is very beneficial, and it will get students to the amount of reading they need to do. However, 88 days is still a long time. That's an entire semester. So there is an alternative, a solution that I believe is a dedicated speed reading component. And if anybody's familiar with Paul Nation, he's been advocating speed reading along with extensive reading for many years. In fact, he's advocated for so long and been frustrated by the lack of uptake in the past that he actually has authored his own series of books. And if that wasn't enough, he then was the author of a second, or editor of a second set of books. So there's two books. I think I have one of, this is actually the older edition. So there's two well-known sets of books for improving time reading or speed reading, and they're both from Paul Nation, different publishers, who interestingly are both from Korea. If you're not familiar with these books, it's a pretty simple concept. There is a relatively short reading passage with controlled vocabulary to make it easy, graded, you might say, followed by a series of questions just to make sure the student has actually read the book. Okay, all these books have a graph at the back for students to track their reading progress. Okay, and this is where they will graph. And the idea is you read hopefully one passage every day, or at least every couple of days, and students will rapidly see improvement. Okay, I'm just curious. I don't know how many people are watching right now. Let's see if I can change my Zoom view. I'm just wondering if has anybody used these books or done timed reading with their students? Nope. Okay. So I can tell you from my experience years ago, and I'll talk about this in a little bit later, it is actually quite effective. Students do see improvement very quickly, and it's very motivating for them. Okay. Okay. Gordy's here. Hey, Gordy, I don't see you, but I saw your comment. And Naheen, you have. Okay. Is Naheen, do you want to comment? How has your experience been? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I used it as part of like an academic program. So we had all the 4 skills, and then we were using it maybe like once a week. We used it, and it was a similar thing because I was working in the same uni as Paul Nation. So it was the same kind of speed reading format. And it would take like 20 minutes in class. And I think, yeah, as you say, familiarity really helps. And the students didn't really mind what the topics were. And then they were able to kind of build up their confidence in terms of reading and not having to worry too much about the detail. And, you know, it was a friendly competition between each of the students as well, because you could just put the like stopwatch on the whiteboard, and then, you know, they would race against each other to see who would finish it first. So that was quite fun.
Nice. And the key point, did your students make did this graph encourage them? Because did they see improvement? Maybe not every single passage, but over time.
So as you said, like the first 2-3 weeks of the term, it's like, you know, they're still kind of trying to figure out the activity. But once they got into the swing of things, then yeah, there was some increase in the speed, and that, you know, that meant that the answers were, they were getting more correct out of 10 questions as well. So that's pretty cool.
Great. Good. Yeah, that was my experience. So I really, I mean, I highly regard anything Paul Nation says, I will, you know, certainly listen to and try. And that's where I got the idea from. And I should mention, it was before his books had even come out. He was giving free material at that time. So it was very good. However, similar to extensive reading, there were a lot of issues. Sorry, Naheen, thank you very much for sharing that information. There are a lot of problems with them implementing extensive reading, a speed reading component. I'm curious, Naheen had these problems. Number one is just accurate timekeeping. You have to rely on students. And when I did it, it was actually before smartphones had become prevalent. So it was challenging, you know, students, I think I put a stopwatch on the overhead camera, and students had to remember to check it. And if they'd forgotten, well, it's kind of too late. They could kind of estimate the time. And then you have the issue of students, you know, forget, or they're not careful, or they're going to, you know, not tell the truth. Tracking of speed over time, meaning they have to remember, not only have to remember to do it, keep track of the time when they read, they have to remember week after week or passage after passage to put it onto that graph. And it can be expensive because while these books are, I think, relatively inexpensive for a textbook, they're rarely going to be the primary textbook. So meaning that for most courses, the teacher has to have their students purchase the regular course book, whatever that might be, plus a timed reading or speed reading. And that in Japan, especially where they're very sensitive about the amount of money students are expected to pay for their materials per course, very often teachers, as much as they want to do extensive reading, couldn't. So those are the three big problems with speed reading. I don't know, Naheem, did you have any other issues that you ran into?
Let's see. So yeah, I mean, timekeeping, of them forgetting to write things down, like the time was always a bit annoying, especially for the next week, so they couldn't compare. Let's see. Sometimes I think, there was maybe just a hang up on some of the vocabulary, depending if it was a completely different topic to what we were doing in terms of the unit. So I think even though it's speed reading and we're trying to encourage them to do extensive reading, that they can still get hung up on vocabulary a little bit. So that's something that maybe we need to bear in mind.
So similar problems. And so there are some solutions. One, Paul Nation, it's interesting, besides he has 2 commercial textbooks, but he also puts free content on his website. You can see a link at the bottom. I don't think I can put that. Later on, I can share that with anybody if they want it. But he does have free reading passages, which solves the cost issue, but it doesn't really solve the tracking issue. Breaking News English has extensive reading. If you're familiar with this, it's a really nice website. They have, every week, they put a couple of new articles up and lots of activities. And they have a very interesting approach to speed reading. They actually kind of force the student to read faster. I think the student can choose the speed, but there's only like 2 or 3 different speeds that they can choose from. And hopefully it matches what they need. Another option is a former colleague of mine. I don't know very well. He just emailed me a few months ago and said he developed his own app. He studies under Paul Nation in New Zealand, and he was creating an app. I don't know if it's free or not. Okay, but he'd gotten some of the free content from Paul Nation and made an app that will do the tracking. So these are 3 solutions. I just thought, well, you know what? There's lots of schools that are already paying for extensive reading as their primary resource or text for their students. So it gave me the idea, well, why don't we just add a speed reading component into X reading without any additional cost, so they can get both the extensive reading and the speed reading. Okay, so what we did is there's actually a new series of graded of speed reading from the publisher Abax. They have 3 levels. And these were intended to be a little bit lower level, especially the first one. It's supposed to be even easier and shorter than the titles I showed you earlier. And since I work with this publisher already, they agreed to license us the books. A teacher can create a speed reading assignment in X reading. When a student, previously I showed you, they can press add book to add a graded reader. They can also add a speed reading passage. Depending on the teacher's settings, the teacher can make all the passages available or choose just 1 passage per week or 1 passage per day, or say you can't get to passage 2 until you get to passage 1. The teacher has total control over which passages the students can see, and in this view, they're all open. The student presses this first one, let's read it. We've tried to give it a racing motif. I don't know if that has much bearing on students, but we have our little racing flags here. The student presses start, and they will see the ready, set, go. They will read, hopefully as quickly as they can, but genuinely read. When they get to the end, they press finish. And very importantly, their reading time is automatically tracked. Okay, so we don't have to worry about them forgetting. Also, to make sure that they genuinely read and at least understand the main points, just like with X reading, we have added quizzes, very simple quizzes. Again, just if they read the passage, they should be able to do very well. Assuming that they pass the quiz, their reading is then tracked automatically on a graph for them. Okay, and every time they read a new passage, the graph just continues to add whatever they've done. And the teacher can always, if you want to see, a teacher can just look at this, what does this actually mean? They can tap on any of the dots and see what the student did, or they can go to the graph view and see it as a graph as well. Okay, so that's what the new speed reading component, we just added it in the beginning of this year, what it looks like. Now, finally, I just want to talk about some research I've done with speed reading. One of the reasons I actually thought it was so important to add it, and it's actually, I thought, some interesting, probably the most interesting research I've ever done, although I've done so little, that's really not saying very much. So I, at the time, was teaching at a foreign language university. We had, I think, several thousand students all there studying English, so lots of research opportunities. And the plan I came up with was a speed reading where 4 teachers, each with experimental and control groups, an equal number. So I had 2 experimental groups and 2 control groups. I think most of my colleagues had 1 of each that were pretty much the same level. The classes there were all based on TOEFL level, and we had, I think, 50 classes. So, the classes were quite homogeneous. So it was a total of 10 classes. Like I said, 5 experimental, 5 control across the 4 teachers. Every teacher, every group had a pre-test the first week of the semester where they did 3 speed reading passages. We figured the first one, maybe they didn't know what they were doing. The second one, they should know. The third one, between the 3 of them, I thought we had a pretty good measure of what their reading speed was at the beginning of the school year. I should mention this is also done with first-year students. The experimental group then went on to do an extensive reading and a speed reading, 1 passage per week. Okay, and the passages were 1 per week. This extensive reading varied by teacher, but it didn't really matter because each teacher had a control group and experimental group, so they could compare. So if I did a lot more extensive reading than my colleague, maybe my groups couldn't compare to his groups as well, but his groups could compare to each other. My groups could compare to each other, like that. And when I show you a graph what this all looks like, it'll make a lot more sense. The control groups, after these 3 reading passages in the first week, all they did was extensive reading. Okay, again, it varied by teacher. And at the end of the semester, all of the groups did 2 speed reading, just to see what kind of gains. Okay, so in summary, everybody has some 3 speed reading passages the first week. Then there's the experimental group and the control group. And at the end, everybody has speed reading again to see what the differences are and, to see really what the effect of the speed reading passages were. So here's what we came up with. We have, I was the first instructor. I had 2 experimental groups, 2 control groups. My students read 13 graded readers over the course of the semester, which now actually, and this is about 10 years ago, I realized now is probably not even enough to have any real impact. At that time, I thought, that was actually before X reading existed and there weren't enough graded readers available. And again, the experimental read 12 passages, the control 0 after the first week. One of my colleagues, he did only 10 graded readers, but again, 12 speed reading passages. John did 8 reading, 8, and Jeff 9. Okay, so as you can see, each teacher had an experimental and a control group to compare each other with. The pre-test, okay, just to find out, to get a benchmark of where our students were starting. As I said, the first week, and then the last week, curious to see what happened. And yeah, some pretty big gains, big differences. And just to make it easier, so you don't have to do the math in your head, you can see right there. So in some cases, the only case that was odd was in Jason's case. The students in the control group made bigger gains in their reading speed, but everybody else, significantly and very large differences. I mean, here is 80 and 33 compared to 21 and 16, 34 compared to 15, and 33 compared to 4. Okay, I don't think you need to run any complex statistical analysis to realize there was a big difference here. So I was very pleased, and it made it very, very clear that the speed reading had a big impact for everybody, except for Jason's students. Then I was curious about something. I said, you know what? Does this actually impact their regular reading speed? What I mean is, yes, these students clearly who have done the speed reading have learned how to do speed reading faster, but do they read faster when they're not speed reading? So the teachers agreed with me. All this had not been planned earlier. We decided that we were going to give a surprise test to the students. What this was, we just told them, okay, this is a reading activity. You're going to have a quiz at the end, but the idea is to read quickly. And it looked just like a graded reader. It was a graded reader we made ourselves, but same size, very simple story. It was a story with simple vocabulary. And we said to the students, you know, it will take about 8 minutes to read this story and you'll take a quiz. And it was a very low stakes quiz. So they weren't under too much pressure, and they were told the quiz would be very easy. What the student did not know was that after 3 minutes, the teacher yelled, "Stop where you are." And the student had to circle the word that they were at that moment. And then they can continue reading, take the quiz. But when they handed in their paper, the teacher can then see how far the students had gotten in those 3 minutes. So in other words, they were doing a speed reading activity without knowing they were doing a speed reading activity. And the results were kind of surprising, that if you compare their reading speed while doing regular reading compared to speed reading, it's dropped tremendously for many students, from 167 to 124, where the control group just went from 114 to 109. These guys went 98 to 94, 143 to 89, 130 to 86, 123 to 121. Okay, so there was a significant, surprising decrease. So the only way I can just explain this without doing further research, which I think is needed, is the experimental group could read faster when they knew they needed to. But if they didn't, they just kind of went back to reading at their normal speed. So it's kind of like if someone learns to do a 50-yard dash and practices a 50-yard dash, they're going to get faster than someone who doesn't. But when they go out jogging in the evening, it doesn't mean they're going to dash while they're jogging. They're going to go back to their normal jogging speed. That was about the best analogy. It's still important, though, because if these students needed to take a standardized test where they knew they had a limited amount of time, they would probably excel over the control group. Also, very interestingly, I was curious, what was the long-term effect? So this went the first semester, which in Japan is basically second week in April until July. The following January, we decided to give a post-test or delayed post-test just to see what happened. And again, none of the students had done speed reading activities in this time, but we gave them a speed reading test just to see what would happen. And very interestingly, the students who had taken the speed reading, they almost, all of them maintained pretty close to what their speed had been. So although they didn't practice it and didn't do it for several months, I guess August, September, October, November, December, January, although they hadn't done it for 6 months, when they went right back to a speed reading, they had maintained the speed that they had reached when they were doing their weekly speed readings. So that was very encouraging. And that, I think we're a bit early, but that pretty much is the end of my presentation. So thank you for listening. We have plenty of time for questions, and this is the last session, so I guess you could also go get dinner earlier. But any questions from anybody?
I think Gordon has a question there. He had his hand up.
Sure.
So I was clapping. Sorry.
I'll take that.
That was applause. But I'll give you another one. How's that?
Okay. Naheem, you have a question?
I do.
Justin has one as well.
But if Justin wants to go first, that's okay, because I've talked a lot.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. It's actually a question on behalf of Liam. He's using X-reading this term. And we were wondering just if there was what was it? It was a...
So...
Oh, hey, Liam, how you doing?
I'm learning for free today. I'm just curious, with X Reading accounts, do you offer like a dummy student option so that teachers can actually go into X Reading as a student and see like how X Reading looks to a student? Like what
we don't only allow it, we encourage it. I guess you're not I don't know what school are you using it at?
Aichi.
Okay, yeah, and they've been using it for a while, so they might have forgotten. I always tell every administrator, please create an account. It's free, and even I always tell them also for any teachers' kids who want to use it. I always want to support teachers, but anyway, whether it's helping your people's family members or just in your case, just so you can see what your students see. Yeah, absolutely. So talk to who's running it there now? Is it
Cameron?
Cameron, yeah. Talk to Cameron, and yeah, absolutely. I'd be very happy, always to give every teacher a free student account.
Cool.
Yeah, it's important to see what your students are doing, and that way, when they have problems, you can help it more easily because you can see exactly what's going on, and you can always log in as your student as well, if you as a real student if you need to.
Sure, of course.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Justin, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just a little bit curious about the experimental and control groups, because it seems that your experimental groups read more than the control groups did. So can we be sure that the improvement is due to their having read fast, read speed reading stuff, or could it be because they'd read more?
Well, I would say I'm not an expert on doing research, but the fact that they had read, both groups had done a lot of extensive reading so my students did 13 books.
Right.
So I would say that was the vast majority of the reading they'd done. In other words, what I'm trying to say is the speed reading was a very small amount of reading that they had done because the extensive reading was so much. So if they had not done extensive reading, you're absolutely right.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah, what I was trying to demonstrate, despite being a strong advocate of extensive reading, is that extensive reading plus speed reading or time reading is going to be more effective.
Right. I had another one, which was about, okay, they're reading faster, but are they reading more fluently in the sense of, are they also understanding the stuff? So I was wondering, like in these quizzes, to test whether they've understood what they've read, did they perform as well?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. I mean, yes, they were taking quizzes. I'm not sure what your question is, though. But
they've demonstrated that they can read faster, but have they demonstrated that they can read faster and still understand what they're reading?
Well, I think they had to, because if they didn't pass the quiz, they wouldn't get credit for the passage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Gotcha.
Yeah. And same, again, it was actually over 10 years. Yeah, I'm sure we would not have given, that was the whole point of the quiz, was to make sure. Yeah. And with X reading, it's automatically graded. But yeah, I'm sure, even though I don't remember doing it, that we would not have given, that was the whole point of the quizzes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Good question.
Thank you.
Okay. Question, Paul, if I could ask.
Sure.
You mentioned that the publishers are supplying you with some audio, perhaps on CD, and I'm hoping that you're getting something that's a little bit more online accessible, or
no, sometimes they give me the CDs. I mean, luckily we can rip a CD, but yeah, several publishers have sent me like 100 CDs I had to rip. Yeah. What's your question? Sorry.
Well, I'm just wondering how how that plays into the LMS. Like, you've got the reading and is the audio part, does that integrate into your X reading LMS the same way the reading of the book would? Like, how does the audio then work with the system?
You mean with the speed reading or just the extensive reading?
Actually, all of it.
Okay, I actually, for time, because I thought I might go too long, which clearly has not been the case, I actually had a slide showing that. So you want me to show you very quickly?
Sure.
I'll go back to that. So I will share my, well, let me go back here. Oh, just again, because I'm not sure, I'll come back here. If anybody is interested in contacting me, there's my email address. Teachers use X reading for free. If you'd like a free trial, let me know. But I don't know if, oh, sorry, you don't see my screen. You have no idea what I'm talking about. That would, You'd think I would know by now how to use Zoom. Okay, now you see my screen?
Soon, there we go. Yep.
Okay. So as I was saying, if you have any interest in trying this just for yourself or, with your school, it's free for teachers. So let me go back to, this is probably going to be a lot of, I probably should just left the slide. Okay, so when a student is reading, they can just press the play button and this will come down. They can change the speed. Oh, let me see if I need to share my sound. And so, while the student is reading, they can just press the play button.
Chapter 1. Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister were sitting under the trees. Her sister was reading, but Alice had nothing to do.
You guys could hear that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What were you going to say, Greg?
I was just like A1 or A2 sort of a speed.
Yeah. Yes, that is very, very slow. So the point is, students who are reading at this level, this is a level 4 book in X reading. Students who can read at this level are going to find that to be annoyingly slow. It's going to actually slow down their reading. So we're going to speed it up the full 20%. And like I said, we remove the distortion that would be caused. So if you're familiar with Alvin and the Chipmunks, that's also about 20%, but you'll see how this sounds.
Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister were sitting under the trees.
Okay, you can hear it sounds quite natural. In fact, some people say it sounds more natural than the slower speed. And just to make a point here, this is the same exact speed, 20% faster without removing the distortion.
Chapter 1. Down the Rabbit Hole.
It's cute.
Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister were sitting under the trees.
Yep. And like I said, if you want your students to practice listening and not reading, because I think Korean students and Japanese students generally have a higher reading proficiency than listening proficiency, and they're doing both for an extended amount of time. My hypothesis is they will default to their stronger skill.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, like I don't read Japanese, but I can read Spanish reasonably well. If I'm watching a movie with subtitles, I will listen and read for 5 or 10 minutes, but after a while, it becomes too tiring. And because I can read better than I can listen, I just start reading, and the sound just becomes background noise.
Right.
Which is not universal. Students in the Middle East tend to have better listening ability than reading. And what I've noticed when I'm doing extensive reading and listening at the same time, they actually close their eyes so they can focus on the audio and don't get distracted by the text.
Interesting.
Yeah. So does that answer your question about how the audio integrates with the
books?
Yeah,
I wasn't thinking about them doing both at the same time. I was thinking that it's just the audio, but I see how it works now. Yes.
Yeah, and you can do both, or one or the other.
Sure.
And I had another. Oh, but we don't have with the speed reading. There is no audio. The speed reading is it's not speed listening, which might be a good idea.
Yeah, you can do it pretty easily. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have the in fact, right now, it hadn't occurred to me to try a speed listening. I guess no publisher has done it because you can't really sell a speed listening anything. But yeah, I guess we could try that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious, who's based in Korea right now besides you? Is anybody else here? I see, well, I guess Justin, I see my colleagues up in Nagoya. Sean or Roxy, are you in Korea? I know Gordon's almost my neighbor.
Yeah, I'm in Korea.
Yes,
okay. Okay, are people doing much extensive reading? There was an extensive reading World Congress. The second one was held in Korea. And since then, it doesn't seem like extensive reading has taken off very much.
I know a couple people who were strongly into it, but I think it's kind of a side, I want to say side or a niche thing done by some people in some contexts, but I don't see it done at university level at all.
Yeah.
The people I have seen try and do it at university level, the people I've seen trying to do it at university level really either weren't very successful with it because of our semesters are 15 weeks, and generally reading classes are not considered proficiency classes. They're really considered test preparation classes. That's kind of the philosophy behind the reading class, would be test preparation.
Okay, I see.
It's kind of, I hate to say this, unfortunate, because the sorry, my screen's a little wonky here. It's unfortunate. It could help. I would like to, personally, I would like to see it done at a younger age. I would like to see it brought in, and that's where we do see like there are actual reading academies, where children basically read a book a week or 2 books a week or something like that, but they pay extra for that, and that's done outside of school. The other issue, like the way the high school system, I guess in Japan as well, is geared up to enter university. And the university system is geared up to prepare students to take a TOEIC test to get a job. And then at the job site, if they're using English, they're actually doing intensive reading. They've got to identify the word in the contract that doesn't make sense, kind of thing. Yeah. It's not. So I as a language learning activity, I think it's great, but I think it belongs in the upper elementary, well, actually lower elementary, all the way through the middle school level. And the kids that I personally know who read a lot of English at a young age are very good at English, even without leaving Korea.
Yeah, interesting.
So I know quite a few, whose parents just bought them lots of English books. And by the time they were in middle school, they're reading Harry Potter and they're reading, Percy Jackson and these kinds of, books for fun. But as younger kids, they were still reading English books.
I think the big difference in Korea is that English education starts younger. When I lived in Korea is when it started from elementary.
Grade 3. Yeah.
From grade 3. So before, when I was there, it changed over. I was in Korea twice, and the first time it was starting in junior high school, and then later. And then they realized they needed to train the elementary school teachers who had not been trained how to do. So I was involved in teacher training. But yeah, I think having come back to Korea now, it makes a huge difference. I think, the English proficiency of Korean university students in general is much better than Japan, because they just, they start younger, and that's when students can learn, learn language much faster. And I think, I don't know if you were alluding to this, Sean, there's several people who are big proponents of extensive reading before, and many of them have left Korea for various reasons.
Part of it is, I think part of it is the lack of research funding for non-Korean researchers in particular. Yeah. So if you're a foreign professor, it's very difficult to get funding.
Yeah.
And extensive reading is often viewed even by the students before they start doing it, before they try doing it. It's viewed by students as being something extra they have to do and they don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And how does this get included in their score? How does this relate to their score if it's not part of their score? And, as you mentioned, and as we know from all kinds of research, there's not a lot of gain either in reading comprehension or vocabulary acquisition or grammar acquisition. There's not a lot of gain in the short term, in the semester length period. You would see the gain over 2 semesters or better over 4 semesters. But you can't force students to take classes. Like in Korea, you can't. It's almost impossible to make something a prerequisite for something else. So to add in a prerequisite reading component is just not going to happen at the university level. It's got to be somewhere younger.
Yeah, there's too many institutional issues. Justin, you tried implementing it, or you were trying to do some extensive reading in your university. It didn't seem to go too well.
Yeah, as we discovered last year, like the universities, I think mine is typical of many. They just don't seem interested in investing in anything that they deem to be peripheral, really. And I think that's an issue. And we you invited me to that evening at Jalfukuka online, and I think that was a topic of conversation there, and how the attitude, is quite different between Japanese and Korean universities, and regarding this kind of thing, they seem quite willing in Japan to pay for things such as X-reading for these for the students' English skill rather than necessarily their English grades.
Yeah, but it also a big difference is it took a long time. I mean, people like, I don't know if you know the name, like Rob Waring, Mark Helgelson, who's actually presenting right at this time, and Tom Robb. They've been for 20 or 30 years. Atsuko Takase, who's a Japanese woman who's also for 30 years been trying to get more. Goes to high schools and gives presentations continuously. So it's been it hasn't happened overnight. It's like that because people have just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And like I said, my experience when I was in Korea, there was quite a few people who were very interested. That's why the Second Extensive Reading World Congress was held in Korea. And within 2 years, all those people had left, gone back to their country. One guy, a Korean, very highly regarded professor in the university, I forget which University of Education. He was the president of CAPE, which is the Korean organization. Like it's like the Korean version. It's like similar to TESOL, but it's predominantly Korean.
There's several, but I'm thinking he's not talking about Kate.
Yeah, Kate. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so he was the president of Kate. Yeah, he was a big advocate of extensive reading, but he retired the next year, and then so that there hasn't been the continuous pushing.
I think
Aaron
sorry, I'm interrupting you. That when the apps like X reading become more common, and that therefore there's more of them, I hate to tell you, come out more frequently, I think the opportunity to get into like after school clubs in the middle schools or in the elementary schools will be there. And when those start having success, then the universities might tag on. But right now, Korean universities are, I don't know about Japan, but in Korea, there's a demographic cliff. And they're closing universities, they're closing programs, they're merging programs at my university, and all the students are protesting. So to suddenly ask to pay for something more is going to be a tough ask, but if it's something that's online, it might be workable.
Yeah, interesting. So Sean, you and Justin are at universities, right?
Yes.
And Roxy, are you at a university as well?
No, I mean, I'm teaching in the elementary school. I was going to say something about what's happening in the elementary school about the extensive reading. Last 2 years since the corona outbreak happened, the Korean government, they have expanded their budget to hire some kind of online program for reading, which I have bought like online reading program for 2 years, but they're not providing that budget anymore. Maybe they thought the corona got better, but still, I think once we have evolved, we're not going to go back. So I think it is going to be the way that we're going to learn English, no matter how long it takes. And then another angle for the adult reading, you might think about the public sector for extensive reading or reading program, but there are some popular programs for audiobooks, which I have bought. The Audible, I bought it. It's quite expensive, but I bought it. And there are other Korean audiobook and apps and programs. So I think it is going to be like popular or more conventional in the future. But I'm not sure about the public sector, but people desire those program and apps. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think especially, people it's like Netflix, people don't want to buy one movie or one TV show. They want to get a subscription, and that's kind of what we provide. May I ask, which is the one you used? Was that Raz Kids or something different with your students?
That's actually a Little Fox. It doesn't include a lot of books, but I had that access, so that's why I bought it.
Okay. Okay. I mean, RazKids is very good, but it's really for native speakers. It's not really for second language learners. But I know it was very popular in Korea a few years ago. When last time I visited, they had that. I guess we've almost taken up all the time. I appreciate everybody staying around and discussing things. I wish I could be in Korea in person. I hope next year I can come back.
I think there's no problem if you want to just stay and talk. This is just my account, so.
Okay. Yeah, I heard it's not like a TESOL account everybody's using. So the last moderator told me he said it was his personal account. Not that it cost him anything, but I was just surprised to hear that.
Yeah, I think it's easier. It's easier for me. And I think it was it was the same last international conference as well. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Good. And yeah, it would be nice to be back in person. Have any of you guys been to JOLT?
Not since the pandemic.
Okay, but you've attended though. You've
3 or 4 times.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, it's a good.
JOLT is a really nice conference. It's longer than TESOL. It's usually 4 days, not 2. I went in Shizuoka one year, in Nagoya one year, and that little town up north. I forgot.
Tsukuba. Those are it. They put it in 3 cities.
I've been to all 3. Yeah. I've been to all 3.
Yeah, this year it's going to be, if they have it, it's going to be in Fukuoka, I think for the first time in 15 years. But they've basically Pan-SIG, which is kind of equivalent to like TESOL National. Every year they put it in a different city, and sometimes some really interesting. Sometimes people go just because of the interesting city.
Can I plug your session there, Paul?
Oh, sorry?
Can I plug your session there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's right.
I've got a lovely poster and everything. So Paul is kindly going to be presenting with Brett Milner at the JOLT Pan-SIG event, which is more of our regional one than the international national one, isn't it? And it's where all of the special interest groups get together. So we're bringing together Paul, who's going to talk about extensive reading, and Brett Milner, who is a member of the Listening SIG, and he's going to be talking about extensive listening. And we've kind of nicely called it, in a playground kind of way, extensive reading versus extensive listening. So.
Oops.
Oh, either everybody was frozen or I was frozen. I guess
it looked like everybody was.
Okay.
I think everyone, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's going to be in Nagano. That's a great thing about Pan-SIG is, I've been to Miyazaki, I've been to Okinawa. They often put it in very in locations teachers don't often get to.
And they're doing it both online and offline?
I think it's in person. They may have like an online component, but I think this is like people are just so sick of online.
It's going to be in person, but and then the SIG session, so all the special interest groups are available hybrid if that special interest group has chosen that option.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a lot more hybrid conferences, things like that. We'll see.
Well, thank you.
Is everybody present? Anybody? I'm sorry. Is anybody else presenting tomorrow? That's right. You are. Okay, you are also Sean.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm presenting as well, but it's going to be a good portion of it is going to be the same. It's going to be only about X reading. So certainly, if you have something else to watch, don't come to mind. If you have questions about X reading, it's going to be all about that. It's a promotional one. Sean, what are you presenting on?
Peer feedback in writing.
Okay.
Comparing online and offline processes, because we had a thing happen last year where we were back in the classroom halfway through the semester, and then we're back online again at the end of the semester. So I had this kind of emergent situation come up where I could look at how the students behaved in their online and offline peer review.
Interesting. Okay. Did you see George McLean from Okinawa presented on peer review on presentation courses today?
I didn't see him, but I've seen and run into him before.
Okay, so, and he comes to TESOL, yeah. And Naheem, what are you presenting on?
I've got 2 tomorrow. One's at 10 o'clock, I think, 10:30, which is about learners and what listening strategies they use. And then I've got a workshop tomorrow at 5, which will be live, which will be okay, let me get this the right order, selecting, grading, and teaching with TED Talks in listening lessons. So.
Okay, I think we might be on at the same time.
Yeah, I think we are. That's why I came today.
Okay, I will try to. Yeah, I think if you're on twice, I'll try to attend one. Greg,
they're
you
all being
all?
recorded. Just watch the video later.
Yeah, no, I'm just hosting. Yeah.
Okay.
I am invited to one of the SIG your JOLT SIGs in online though, doing on podcasting. So.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, and Zheng, you're here. Zheng presented earlier on narrow reading. I don't know if she's actually here. I see her avatar. And Roxy, you're not presenting?
Not this time.
Okay.
But I was going to say something about Gordon just left a message saying that the curriculum is changing. Do you know anything about that? I have recently learned about it, so I might have something to share.
The curriculum?
Yeah, like Korean English curriculum, they revise maybe 5 years or 10 years. Recent revision has made it 2015. And the next revision, which is 2022, has been already announced. And then there is a huge emphasis on creativity and critical thinking. That was not, yeah. So probably there might be some space for, reading, because critical thinking often comes with the, content.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you get so many ideas from reading. The two certainly match. I think Gordon meant his. I know Gordon. He meant his university has been talking about getting X reading, and they haven't been able to fit it into their curriculum. So I think that's what he meant. Is that he's going to probably call me. He's in Kobe, between Kobe and Osaka, and I'm in Osaka, so we often meet up at different events. And Greg, where are you based?
In Yongin. Actually, I'm not far.
Oh, we talked about that before. Yeah, farmland or Everland. Yeah. And Roxy, where are you?
I'm in Osan in Gyeonggi-do.
Osan, okay.
Yeah.
I said I lived in Suwon when I lived in Korea. My first time teaching at a Hongwon.
I was just going to say you're just down the road from me because I'm in Suwon too.
Yeah, that's right. When I met Justin, I remember when I first got there looking for the Suwon Castle. I didn't realize it was not actually a castle. There's a wall, but there was no castle. It took me about 3 months searching to realize there is no castle. But it became a World Heritage Site. I was really impressed. And they fixed it up a lot when I came back to visit a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, put some money into it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Yeah, I mean, yeah, very nice. Roxy, how far are you from Suwon?
Not quite far, in a 20 minute or so. So I remember that I saw you twice.
You saw me?
Yeah, one in the TESOL, like after party.
In you mean in the real, like?
Yeah, it's a long time ago. It's a few years ago. It sounds like quite a long time ago, but still, we used to have some face-to-face conference after party thing.
Yeah,
you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it the one in COEX or the one in Sungmin?
Okay, I attended every year, so I forgot where exactly it was, but still, I only remember. Maybe it's the area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, hopefully I'll be back. Yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry I don't remember, but it's been so many conferences, and think about Korea. The food is so good. Oh, I really want to come back. Yeah, just great. Anyway, it's getting kind of late.
Speaking of food.
What?
Speaking of food.
Anyway, Justin, please get in touch if your situation changes. Sean also, if you think, and Roxy, X reading really isn't for elementary school students, but if you thought there'd be any interest, let me know. I'll put my information here. Hold on. Did I actually type that correctly?
So if I register for X reading, then I'm just looking at the. So anyways, I have to send you information, answer all those questions.
Yeah, I have to create. It's not for independent learners, so it's only for institutional use, which could be one teacher and one student. So, but it has to have a teacher who creates an assignment for their student.
Right.
So you just email me and send me an institution, real one or an imaginary one, and your account information. I'll create an account for you. And like I said, teachers use it for free, and teachers can always get one free student account, which
Cool.
you can use yourself or give it to somebody else.
All right. Sounds good. Very interesting.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I hope I'll see you tomorrow. Justin, you here tomorrow? Yep. Thanks, Roxy.
Yes.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
Good night.
See you then.
Bye-bye.